Hello and welcome to Montgomery County Police Beat. I'm Patrick Lacefield, Director of Montgomery County's Office of Public Information. I'm here with Montgomery County Police Chief Tom Manger to talk about two very important public safety concerns. One is the rise in violent gang activity in the county, and the other is the dramatic increase in opioid overdoses. Chief Manger, thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
Now, one of the first things you did upon becoming police chief in Montgomery County more than a dozen years ago is set up a gang task force. You know, up until a couple of years ago, we were sort of bragging in the county that we hadn't had gang homicides for several years, and we were happy about that. But the last couple of years, it seems like that's turned around a little bit. Can you talk a little bit about why that is?
Well, I think it's a number of reasons, not the least of which is the instructions that gangs are getting from overseas, and I'm talking specifically about the MS-13, instructions that they're getting from El Salvador about ramping up their income, doing better at recruiting, just trying to get more folks into the gang, upping the violence. Those instructions from overseas have manifested themselves in the United States, and it's not unique to Montgomery County. I mean, this is happening nationwide.
But it's been that different in the last couple of years.
It has been, and also if you look at some of the national issues, with regard to immigration and decisions about unaccompanied minors and those sorts of things, that's all had an impact as well. And it's not necessarily directly tied to gangs, but when you have an influx of folks that get here and don't have the support system that that we hope they would have in terms of families to live with, to take care of them, making sure somebody ensures that they're doing well in school, that they have good employment histories, and all those things that sort of are a recipe for success in life. When you have people that are struggling in all those areas, they're ripe for recruitment from gangs, unfortunately.
So are you able to say that there's an increase in the number of gang members or the increase in the number of gangs in the county?
I don't think we're seeing an increase in the number of gangs. We've always had a handful, and as we've talked about before, you've got gangs that are neighborhood gangs that are come in all races and ethnicities. And, you've got the Latino gangs that we have, MS-13 being the most widely known. And I don't see an increase in the number of gangs. Unfortunately, we've just seen an uptick in the violence associated with these gangs.
Now, does this happen everywhere in the county, or are there certain areas that are more hot spots that you all are focusing on?
I guess the good news is that the gangs aren't an issue in most areas of the county. They really are specific to areas like Germantown and Montgomery Village and Wheaton, parts of Silver Spring. I mean, that's where we have our gang activity. So the good news is that we know where to focus our efforts, because the gangs aren't operating in most areas of the county. The challenge is that you've got a public in particular neighborhoods where gangs are operating that are afraid to come forward. You get folks that are afraid of being victimized. They're afraid of the gangs, and so to get the cooperation we need in terms of getting information from the public is sometimes a struggle for us.
I mean, we've had several cases recently where gangs actually killed other people who either were other gang members or people whom they suspected were betraying them in some way, shape, or form.
Right, but you describe those victims. They're folks that have some nexus to the gangs. The gangs are preying on each other. They're either preying on other gangs, or they're preying on their own members that they feel like aren't doing what they're supposed to do. So, these folks are no less victims, and it certainly is a concern to the police department and the residents of this county, because we don't want to see anybody be a victim like that. But we're not seeing cases where innocent people are being targeted by these gangs, and again, it's just specific areas.
There's at least some connection.
Yeah, and so if you talk to a lot of folks in this county about gang violence, they say, well, I don't see it, not impacted by it, and they're not as concerned about it. But we certainly are concerned and are doing everything we can to reduce that violence, and the emphasis has never gone away that the best way to solve this problem is through prevention. That is, let's prevent kids from joining these gangs in the first place. And those efforts are still strong, and they still continue.
Now, recently, the county council approved a request by the county executive to put another $500,000 into anti-gang efforts. How do you intend to spend that money?
A couple of ways. One is to add a couple of gang detectives. And especially target those areas that I mentioned. We want to make sure that we have boots on the ground, officers that are interacting with these gang members, that are getting information directly from some of the kids that know about what's going on. We've got also folks that are doing longer term investigations, more like the federal RICO type investigations where you're targeting gang leadership in the longer term investigations. We've got additional resources with the state's attorney's office to help with enhanced prosecutions. And then we've got civilian analysts who are doing much of the analytical work, because before we would have gang detectives having to do that, spend time doing that, and that was valuable work, but that you don't need a detective to do that kind of work. And if you can get someone who's trained in crime analysis and put them there, that's a more effective way to deploy put your gang detectives out on the street, let the analysis work be done by the crime analysis. And so we've got additional crime analysis help in that money as well.
Now, how much cooperation do you get with the state of Maryland, with other jurisdictions, with the federal government on some of these joint anti-gang efforts?
We get a fair amount. I'll tell you, in the Washington, D.C. area, there's a fair amount of coordination that goes on. We have a great relationship with the U.S. Attorney's Office, and we've had, even over the past 3-4 years, we've had some big cases involving gangs. And the sort of the pattern is that you have these big cases, you lock up dozens of members of a gang, you dismantle that gang basically, and 6 months goes by and you hear nothing about that particular gang. Well, then it starts to build itself back up. A couple years later, that gang's operating again. So even these prosecutions are sort of temporary measures but they're effective, but unfortunately they're only temporary with some of the gangs.
Let's talk about the opioid crisis for a minute. It's obviously a national plague. What are you seeing in Montgomery County?
Well, this is very disturbing. I mean, for the past 3 years, we have not only seen the number of opioid overdoses that we've responded to go up each successive year, but we've also seen the number of deaths go up. And I think in 2017, we were looking at over 60 deaths. And that's that's really a challenge for us. And when you do the analysis as to who the folks that died or the folks that are overdosing, you can't make
it's a cross section.
It is a cross section by age, by race, by you name it. I mean, there is no pattern here in terms of who is struggling with opioid addiction. It's a lot of different people, and it really is a great concern for all of us in Montgomery County, in the state of Maryland, in our whole country, really.
Now, initially, it was more our fire and rescue service who administered the antidote.
Right.
Talk a little bit about that antidote if you can, but now the police are doing that as well.
Yeah, it's Narcan, naloxone, goes by a couple different names, but we have equipped our officers with it because sometimes we're the first ones on the scene of these overdoses. It's a miracle drug. I mean, it's a nasal spray. You spray it on these folks that are overdosing and that are passed out. They come around almost immediately, and it is a real lifesaver. We've had folks that probably could have been on the way to dying from this overdose that have been brought back by public safety first responders because we have this drug. So the only downside is that it gives some folks some feeling that, well, if I overdose, I can get this drug and I'll be okay. When you have someone who's dealing with addiction, that's not a good choice for them.
In other words, some people think, well, I don't need to change my behavior or what I do or get clean, because if I go too far, somebody will be there or could be there to save me.
Yes, unfortunately.
And does that provide some sort of mixed feelings for officers and people who administer this?
You know, there actually have been discussions and you know, about that issue. You know, are we enabling these addicts by using this drug? Well, you're saving their lives, and
same way as if they fell in the lake.
Right.
You get them out.
Right. So the key is, how you react to or how you respond to these overdoses. And one of the things, and I know we had talked earlier about our STEER program, and so you know, when the police respond to these overdoses, we're not interested in making an arrest. You know, I mean, we're dealing with people who have addiction issues. Incarceration is not what they need. Treatment is what they need. And I think that our response today is so much better than it was years ago. Today, when a police officer responds to an opioid overdose, we have a social worker that works with us and that responds with us 24/7. And so when we're dealing with that person, we have a social worker right there who is making arrangements for them to go into treatment. And that's actually a pretty good time sometimes when you're when you're first getting there and someone has had an overdose. We've been pretty successful.
It can be a wake-up call.
It can, and you're catching them at the right time where we're getting them to agree to go into treatment. And the really good news is that the analysis that we've done on the folks that we've gotten into treatment, when you look at who is still in treatment 30 days later, 60 days later, it's a good percentage of the folks that we're dealing with. So, and that's ultimately the way you're going to have to solve this issue is through treatment and education.
Now, my understanding is the opiate fentanyl can be difficult for officers to deal with.
We've had cases around the country where police officers have responded to these overdoses. They're collecting evidence. They get this drug on their skin, and it can be absorbed, whether it's absorbed through them breathing it in or getting it on their skin. And we've actually had first responders who have overdosed. And I read about one case, it wasn't in Montgomery County, but I read about one case where one of the people on the scene had the naloxone and were able to administer it to the public safety worker who was starting to feel the effects of the drug, and they were able to treat that contact that they had with the drug. So it's we have had to educate officers and first responders to about physically dealing with that drug to keep themselves safe.
Now, finally, let me just ask you this question briefly. There's a certain stigma attached to this.
Yeah.
How do you get people to overcome the stigma of reaching out and saying to friends or family, you need help?
Well, this is all part of the education message that the community needs to hear. And I think one of the ways that the police department is helping that is making this about addiction and treatment and not about criminal justice system or not about incarceration or not about criminally charging someone, And so my hope is that when the community realizes that good, honest, decent people can become, addicts, that stigma lessens, and it could happen to any of us. So we're trying to send that message.
Great. Chief, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
I'm Patrick Lacefield, and along with Montgomery County Police Chief Tom Manger. Thank you for watching. Please join us again next time for Montgomery County Police Beat, when we'll get straight answers from the Chief about law enforcement issues that matter to you.
Interested in career success? Get to Montgomery College and we'll get you going. You can earn an associate's degree in only 2 years. With 3 campuses, award-winning faculty, and multiple online learning opportunities, Montgomery College will empower you to set your course and succeed. Want to pursue a bachelor's degree? If you start at MC, you can save 1/3 on total tuition costs of a 4-year program. Apply today.